You are listening to PowerScore's Law Practices podcast series. Today's topic is the practice of political law. On the program, we will hear from Craig Engel, founder of the Political Law Group at Arent Fox, Kenneth Gross, partner and head of the Political Law Practice at Skadden Arps, and Susan Gallagher, associate professor at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Politics and the law are seen by our guests as very similar entities, but at times can be very different ones as well. The political law practice began in the 70s after the Watergate scandal and covers everything from campaign finances to election regulation. Our guests today discuss the practice of political law and the comparisons and differences of politics and the law, and advice for students interested in this practice. Our first guest, Kenneth Gross, explains political law and the origins of where it stems.
Political law came into being just about the same time I came into being as a lawyer. We are a post-Watergate creation. Is really the first time after Watergate was there any kind of palpable, significant regulation of money in politics and other aspects of politics. So I was in this sort of unique position of being in the ground floor of a area of law and to kind of craft it, at least as it occurs in my law firm. I didn't have years of precedent and prior practice like you would in tax or antitrust or securities or other regulatory areas.
Craig Engel offers his take on the practice, explaining the wide range of issues that can be addressed.
Political law is the practice of law that regulates the election of people to office. Politics is a regulated industry. So getting on the ballot, having petition signatures, contesting an election, congressional ethics when you're charged with ethical behavior violations, redistricting and reapportionment, and then recounts. All of those sort of things that go into creating a Congress and creating the congressmen and senators that are what political law is. Also, political law includes the campaigns and elections. The campaigns and not just the elections, but the campaigns for office. For example, the advertisements that you see. Those are all regulated as well. So whether it's the campaign or the election, into the election of congressmen and senators is political law.
Now, Susan Gallagher believes that politics and the law aren't quite synonyms, but they definitely do bear a resemblance.
Although many politicians are lawyers, not all are, and there is a difference between changing things politically and changing things legally. So it's not quite synonymous, but a huge overlap.
However, she goes on to explain the main differences between politics and the law as well.
Well, generally speaking, just in the most wide way, the politics in the U.S. is democratic, and the legal system, is a matter of argument. It's not a democratic system. So that's just a very basic distinction. But as fields of endeavor, as fields as your occupation, again, it's very different from being a politician than it is to working in the legal system. One appeals to the people and the other appeals to the law.
Ken suggests that politics and the law are definitely different disciplines, but can come together for a variety of reasons.
The law is a interpretive process based on a body of cases and statutory law, and politics is based on policy and but I think that they come together in the sense that the American people in a democracy influence the outcome of legislation, what's going on in society impacts those, particularly at the higher courts and most notably at the Supreme Court. So to say that they're different disciplines, they certainly are, but at some point they do converge.
And Craig suggests that politics can house conflict resolution, and law is the result of just that.
Law is the result of politics. Law is conflict resolution. Every law that you read, or every regulation that you read, or court decision, is the result of conflict resolution. A plaintiff, a defendant, an environmental group, and a corporation, or two competing points of view as to how food should be regulated. Each one of those things ends up in a written decision, either in the form of a judge's opinion, a statute coming from Capitol Hill, or a regulation that is created from a government agency. Politics is going to go into two of those three conflict resolution practices. That is the legislation on Capitol Hill, of course, and maybe there is some politics in the creation of a regulation.
Craig also says there is no replacement for having legal experience in politics, but there are a large number of politicians who come from different fields, and for that our government is able to have views and opinions from a variety of sources.
There is no substitute, in my opinion, for legal experience in understanding the lawmaking process. Having said that, it's important that with real-world experience also be on Capitol Hill. That's one of the reasons that we have 435 congressmen and 100 senators, so we can have a large variety of people who represent us.
Kenneth agrees, saying politicians don't have to be educated in the law, but it is definitely common and helpful.
They don't need to be. I'm sure that if you look at the professions of most of the members of Congress and in state legislatures across the board, and those even serving in the executive branch, you'll see the most common profession will be lawyer. And I don't know how many there are in Congress right now, but I know there's a lot of them. All knowledge doesn't begin and end with lawyers. And I think having non-lawyers in lawmaking positions is as important as it is to have a certain number of lawyers. Everybody brings their own perspective to the table, and I think having a law background is helpful, particularly when you get into the crafting of legislation and the understanding of the ambiguity that comes out of certain words and laws that may spawn a lot of litigation. But on the other hand, when you're not that far into the weeds and you're sort of crafting concepts and policies and directions that law should be taken, those that are in other walks of life can in many times bring more to the table.
And Susan believes it is a good skill to be educated in the law, to be a good politician.
I mean, for example, the chancellor at my university, Marty Meehan, was a congressman, but he's also a lawyer. So, it's essential to, I think, for whether or not people have a JD. If you want to go into politics, definitely you need to be informed about the legal system and our history. I mean, all things political are based on our legal system, the Constitution.
And in his final advice, Kenneth suggests students who are interested in political law look at the two kinds of firms they can work for: those who work for the politicians themselves and those who work for the institution.
Number of ways to go. In our particular law firm, in the private sector part of this area, I have taken the direction of representing corporations and to a somewhat lesser extent trade associations, where others around town have focused more on a partisan practice. And Democrats, we're going to represent Republicans, and we're going to represent congressmen that are, their campaign committees or something. I frankly have stayed away from that. I have represented high-profile candidates, including presidential candidates, but I generally stay away from it. 95% of our work that we do in our practice area is corporate related, because one of the things that's happened over the years, over the 30 or so years that this has been a regulated area, is that there has been more and more regulation of corporations and concerns by corporate shareholders about the political activities of companies, and that's the sort of market that we have pursued as an interest to someone coming up through the ranks out of law school. Obviously, you would look at a firm like ours, or maybe some others that are doing it perhaps on a lesser scale. And then there are those firms, as I said, that are more involved in representing candidates of political party committees, and that would be yet another way to go.
And for those students who are just starting their legal or political education, Susan suggests that political science is a great major to start with.
Yeah, well, I think that it's very helpful for, for students who want to, or undergraduates who want to proceed to law school, to major in political science really makes sense, because it sets you up to have an understanding of the legal system before you get to law school. And so I think that this overlap, again, so the other thing I just should mention, too, is there's a whole other, sort of overlapping area where people who if you want to work for a nonprofit, if you want to work for a political advocacy group, going to law school is, again, it's not an elected thing, but going to law school, there's, advocacy groups require lawyers, and so do nonprofits, even, public service nonprofits that are not necessarily partisan or political. They all of them have lawyers working for them. So there's also that overlap. So you're not actually a government official. You're working but you're working in the nonprofit sector. So that's another, again, if you are interested in politics, you can go to law school with an eye towards working for an advocacy or social services group.
Finally, Craig says if you're interested in constitutional law, then take an election law course, and if you can, visit D.C. for a semester and see what it is like to be surrounded by the countries of government.
I would say that if you enjoy constitutional law and the law of democracy, I would encourage you to take a look at it. There are many universities that offer courses in election law, sometimes undergraduate universities and certainly law schools. Take the course. If you're interested in constitutional law, take the course and see what you think. Come to Washington for a semester if your school allows you to do that, and look around and see if you enjoy what you're looking at on Capitol Hill or in the White House or in one of the government agencies. A semester in Washington, and I think you'll have a good idea as to whether or not you want to take part in politics, law, and political law.
Thank you for listening to PowerScore's podcast series. If you want more information on PowerScore's podcasts or services, please visit PowerScore.com, or you can call 1-800-545-1750.